less effort to do it. And I think that people, like we'll have 1,000 people at this event coming from all over the world, and they'll learn how to do that. And if you're going to believe in a future, that you're imagining with all of your heart, it better be open and activated. And we actually measure. So we can say to the person, Aubrey, you're doing it. Or we could say, you're not doing it. And that's important to know because,
for sure.
because then you're going to pay attention and do it better, right?
Yeah. I think that's one of the real incredible things that you've offered the world is that so it starts with this mystical understanding that isn't brand new. I mean, Jesus said, pray as if it has already been done, which is putting you in the state of gratitude rather than state of hopefulness, in the state of, I hope this happens and I am, in this spot, but maybe later it'll be there. Pray as if it has already been done. So it's that mystical truth, but then you combine it with the pragmatism of how you practice it, along with the science of how you measure it. And now it's something for our time, like something for everyone that we can really grab a hold of.
Well, I think first of all, science is the contemporary language of mysticism. I think, if you're studying the life of Jesus as an example, or Buddha, that was the language of the time, right? So here we are in a contemporary world, and science has become that language. So when you combine a little quantum physics with neuroscience and neuroendocrinology and psychoneuroimmunology and epigenetics, all of those different branches of sciences, the new sciences, point the finger at possibility. And in this particular work, I think that the more you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, the how gets easier, because you can assign meaning to what you do. So then, this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. Because information is so readily available, you can gain information. You don't need an authority. You don't need a priest. You don't need a teacher. You don't need a governor. You can gain information without passing through some type of authority. And so people are empowered. And the next most practical question is, how am I going to apply this to my life? Now, when you learn new things, you make new connections in your brain. That's what learning is. But if you can't remember what you learned, then you haven't made any new connections that are sustainable or maintainable. So the more the person can repeat what they've learned, the more they're installing the neurological hardware in their brain in preparation for the experience. And so now they're priming their brain for the act, right? And when the experience happens, experience then enriches the circuitry in your brain. That's what experience does. So now you're laying down even more neurological tracks, but the payoff is the chemical called the emotion. And the moment you feel unlimited, the moment you feel grateful, the moment you feel abundant, now you're teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind is intellectually understood. So knowledge is for the mind and experience is for the body. And now we're embodying the truth of that philosophy. And we're literally signaling new genes in new ways and changing our future, or changing our genetic future. And if you've done it once, then you're an athlete, you'd be able to do it over and over again. And if you keep repeating it, you neurochemically condition your mind and body to begin to work as one. And the redundancy of the act over and over again conditions the body to know how to do it better than the mind. Now it's innate in you. It's second nature. It's easy. It's familiar. It's who you are. And so I think we start as philosophers, we initiate, we become initiates, and then we master it. Knowledge, experience, wisdom, mind, body, soul. Learning it with your head, applying it with your hands, knowing it by heart, thinking to doing to being. And so I think to answer that kind of question or that comment is that, we should get up as if our prayers are already answered. The problem is that our senses fool us into separation. The person says, I want to be healed, I want to be healthy, I want to be wealthy. And they imagine it, and they come back, and it's not there. And when they see it, it's not there. The thought of their future creates the emotion of lack or separation. And if thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body, now you have mind and body in opposition. So then, if you think about something like appreciation or thankfulness or gratitude, when you are receiving something, when you just receive something, when something is happening to you in the moment, or something just happened to you that you enjoy, or you're surprised about, or is pleasing to you, you feel this emotion of gratitude. So gratitude becomes the signature, the emotional signature that it's already happened. Gratitude is the ultimate state of receiving. So now when the person combines a clear intention of their future and they open their heart and they feel the emotion of that future, their body is objective. It's the unconscious mind. It doesn't know the difference between the actual experience in their life that's creating the emotion and the emotion that they're fabricating by thought alone. In that moment, their body is believing it's in that future, in the present moment. And the stronger the emotion they feel, the more altered they feel inside of them, the more they pay attention to the picture in their mind. And we could say then that they're beginning to remember their future. And biologically, it's the same as remembering your past. So if you keep practicing opening your heart and you keep combining it with a clear intention, then the thought and the feeling changes your state of being, which means then if you keep doing that over time, you'll feel like your future has already happened. Now, what's the significance of that? If you feel like your future has already happened, you stop looking for it. You're no longer waiting and wondering when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen. You feel like it's already happened. So now you take your foot off the gas and you're no longer trying to predict or control or expect how it's going to happen. You're connected emotionally to your future. Well, the antithesis is also true. The stronger the emotion you feel for some betrayal, some shock, some trauma, the more altered you feel inside of you, the more you narrow your focus on the outer environment and the brain takes a snapshot, and that's called a memory. And so the stronger the emotion, the more the brain embosses the imagery neurologically in the brain. So then the person thinks neurologically within the circuitry of that experience, and they feel within the boundaries of those emotions. So then we could say then the person's biology is literally in the past. So you can't create a new future if your state of being is in the past. So people reaffirm their identity this way. They wake up in the morning and they say, let me think about my problems. And those problems are memories of past experiences that are etched in their brain. So they think about the person, the place, the object, the experience. And we could say then, if they believe that their thoughts have something to do with their destiny, they're thinking in the past. And every one of those problems has an emotion associated. So now they feel unhappy. Now they feel fear. Now they feel unworthy.
And they might be addicted to those feelings.
Oh, no. It's a conditioning process because conditioning, all you need is an image. They've mastered this on television. An image or a brand and an emotion. And all you need is a stimulus and a response. So every time the person remembers their future, their past, as they remember their past, the image with the emotion is literally subconsciously conditioning their brain and body into the past. And so if they're living in the familiar past, guess what? They're going to predict the next future. They're going to want to be able to predict their future. So because that's the known. So that there's only one place where the unknown exists, and that's the present moment. And teaching people how to get into the generous present moment takes an act of awareness. And most people would rather turn on their TV or, get on their cell phone or Facebook or whatever because...
Well, that reaffirms their present, which is living in the past, right? And I've noticed this even with myself. I know that I'm addicted to the stress hormones and that state of struggle and that state of fighting to try and build my business, to try and create this message, to try and deliver this blessing that I knew I had early on and make sure that I deliver it in the best way possible, and all the pressure and all the anxiety and all the worry about that. And I'll wake up and I'm so addicted to those stress cocktails that the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to charge straight into my Instagram, which is the expression of all of these things and the reaffirmation of my identity up to this point. And then I get that nice rush, that nice kick of everything that's been before and the Aubrey that's lived up to this point. And then that stress hormone then wakes me up and I'm ready to start my same ass day that I've had so many times before.
And this is actually, Aubrey, not a bad thing. This is actually a moment of awareness.
Yeah.
And when you're inside the jar, you can't see the label. And so we have this huge frontal lobe that gives us self-awareness. So then the insight never changes anything. You could have the insight that you're addicted to fear, you're addicted to competition, you're addicted to struggle. But that really means is that we're addressing reality matter to matter. And what we're at one point of awareness, one point of consciousness, and we're putting our attention on another point of consciousness, a future, an outcome. And the only way we know how to get there when we're matter trying to change matter is that we force, we control, we predict, we fight for it. Because that's how you are when you're living in survival. So then we have to move our bodies through space, and that takes time. So we think if we rush, that we're actually going to get there faster. But more and more of the rushing creates more of the addiction of those emotions, because the adrenaline that's released is actually an arousal. So a person is using the conditions, the problems, the situations in their life to reaffirm their addiction to some emotion. To me, that means we become addicted to the life we don't even like. And so that's why change is so hard. So then let's offer another alternative. Well, when you begin to create from the field instead of from matter, the only way you can do that is you have to learn how to take all of your attention off your body and become a nobody. Take all of your attention off all the people in your life that you give so much of your attention and energy to because you have an emotion associated with them. And get beyond all the people in your life and go from a someone to a no one. Mm-hmm. Now, if you've worked your whole life being a someone, or if you've been working your whole life thinking that you're your body, you're going to have to work a little harder because that's your identity. Sure. That's what you're associated with. And
it's a long time of conditioning that you have to unwind.
And if this was easy, everybody would be doing it. So then you have to go get beyond all the things in your life, your cell phone, your computer, your car, and literally go from something to nothing. You have to take all your attention off the place you work, the place you live, the place you need to be, the place you're sitting, and go from somewhere to nowhere. You got to stop thinking about the predictable future and the familiar past and go right into the present moment and go from some time to no time. And if you do that properly, you become pure consciousness. And that's how you enter the field. Now, we've done the research on this. We call it getting beyond the self. Now, once you are pure consciousness, you're taking all of your attention off this three-dimensional reality. Now, where you place your attention is where you place your energy. So if you've taken all of your attention off of everything material, there's only one place you're going to wind up, and that is the immaterial realm called the quantum field, an invisible field of energy that unifies and connects everything material. So now when you're creating from the field and you combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, and you're connected and you feel connected, the suggestion of an alternative way to create is that when there's a vibrational match between your energy and some future reality, you actually no longer have to go anywhere to get it. You're actually the vortex, and you will collapse space and time and draw the experience to you. Now that, to me, is a lot more fun because the experience is the unknown. You can't predict when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen, because if you can predict it, it's the known. So then you have to lay down the very thing you use your whole life to get what you want for something greater to occur. Now that goes against generations untold of conditioning and a lifetime of habituation, believing that we're trapped in this material world. And yet, I can say to you, without a doubt, that once you understand that formula, and once you know how to create that kind of brain and heart coherence, the side effect of that is a change in biology, neurologically, chemically, hormonally, genetically. We've measured it. We've seen gene regulation changes in 4 days. More brain coherence, more heart coherence. Your brain's working better. You're trusting your heart. It's open. There's different chemicals that are released. Oxytocin suppresses survival centers, resets the baseline of a person's trauma or shock. Your immune system goes up. Mm-hmm. You lengthen your telomeres. We've measured that too. So you're changing the future of your body. You're extending your life. That's evidence, right? So we have the evidence to know that it could happen because we've measured it. But the real evidence is watching the testimonial of someone who says, I had stage 4 cancer. I was told as a 41-year-old woman that I wouldn't live for more than 2 months. And I have no evidence of cancer in my body at all. Or someone that's a physician who has Parkinson's disease that's tried everything from the medical route and has one transcendental moment, and their tremors and their pain are gone. Then now they're chewing food, they're swallowing, they're blowing their nose, they're standing up on their own. That's energy affecting matter. So we have hundreds and hundreds of testimonials of people that not only healed their body, but created pretty profoundly magical things in their life. So you have evidence in the scientific world, you have evidence in the practical world, and evidence is the loudest voice right now.
Yeah, it's necessary to overcome that bias of the rational mind that we develop to get us past these superstition, like the superstition stage where we were afraid of all kinds of things. Then we relied on science to get us past that point where we could have something we could have faith in. And now that we can have the science that can harness the abilities and match up with the things that you're saying, that really empowers us to overcome that initial objection and allows us to empower our belief to actually reach that state.
And the accelerator of that whole process is witnessing it. Because I'll stand on the stage. I did this just in our last week-long event in Cancun. And I watched a man stand on the stage and tell his testimony of his healing. I looked out in the audience. There wasn't a person in the audience that was thinking about anything else. They were witnessing truth right before their eyes, a miracle. Now, you see that, and you look at the person, it doesn't look like a movie star, doesn't look like a vegetarian, doesn't look like they're buffed, doesn't look like they're different than anybody else. They just look like an average person. And the most common thought that happens when you witness that is, if that person can do it, so could I. And that drops the belief right away. You cannot go back to being the same person after you witness that. It's impossible. You're witnessing that type of transformation. And stroke patients that have had a paralyzed limb for years or been blinded by a stroke, that have perfect vision again. And the scans from their physician shows a complete 100% recovery. Now, strokes don't heal if they don't heal in 2 weeks, according to the conventional model of medicine. And nerves don't really come back online if they've been damaged after a period of time. And yet we're witnessing those kind of supernatural changes. So then the belief, the subconscious belief that that is impossible. You may say, oh yeah, I believe that a person can be healed. Yeah, I believe in miracles. But when it comes time to actually execute them, you got to step outside a little bit and you got to trust a whole lot. So then when you start witnessing it, it becomes like a brush fire. I mean, we see in our events, once we start seeing those healings, we know it's going to just get better and more phenomenological. And then the side effect of that is a person with Raynaud's syndrome who has incredible sensitivity to cold, that has an immune problem, that is, you can't go out of their house. They stand on the stage and they say, I cannot believe it. I was just outside. It's November in London. I have no pain in my hands. And someone in the audience watches the same thing. We had 4 people at that event with Raynaud's syndrome go into complete recovery, into complete remission. So just like an infection spreads amongst the community and creates disease, all of a sudden health and wellness can be as infectious as disease. And wow, and all of a sudden it's the new consciousness, it's the new way. It's so we don't have to rely on something outside of us to make us feel better inside of us. We begin to figure that out.
And I think that's, that was when I read You Were the Placebo, that was that ultimately compelling case to remind us that, hey, this is something that every clinical trial accounts for. It accounts for the mind affecting the body. So anybody who's a skeptic, you can't be a skeptic. And you list, hundreds in that book alone, right? But then just knowing that we account for that in every single randomized clinical trial that we do, we account for the placebo effect affecting the body in a positive way. So we know that this happens, but that nonetheless, when something spectacular happens with the placebo effect, spontaneous remission, we'll discard that as like, that was random. Yeah. Even though we know that the placebo effect is real, or the nocebo effect, the opposite of that, is also real, still science wants to kind of like, let's just discard these spontaneous remissions.
Well, I'm actually more interested in deepening that understanding, which means, do we need a sugar pill, a saline injection, or some false surgery or procedure to change our state of being? I mean, do you need some external influence? Because the sugar pill is a symbol. It's a symbol of possibility, and the person has been conditioned that pills heal people. So they put their power into it, and the moment the physician says, this is a new drug, and the physician is enthusiastic or excited about it, that enthusiasm becomes contagious. And the person all of a sudden sees the possibility in their mind. They actually see a future that they actually could be healthy or better. That's a clear intention. And when they feel optimistic, when they feel inspired, when they feel grateful, when they're changing their emotions or energy, they're combining a clear intention with an elevated emotion. And if thoughts are the vocabulary of the brain and feelings are the vocabulary of the body, and how you think and how you feel creates your state of being, they just moved from their past present state of being into a future present state of being. They began to change their brain and body by thought alone. So then, do you need that sugar pill, or can you just do it without it and get so good at doing it that you can change your state of being without the belief that you need to rely on something outside of you?
How fucking radically empowering, though, right?
No,
like
it
to
is.
take control of that mechanism and also this is the time that it needs to happen, because the general skepticism of the medical industry and of the pills actually working and of the conventional treatments actually working, that's on a downward decline. I would say on the macro, people are trusting that, oh, I can just take a pill and everything will be fixed. People are trusting that less. So as they trust that less, their actual belief that that is going to happen is going to decrease. So the result of that happening is going to decrease. So we need something else to replace that, which is the methodologies that you're really teaching.
Now, there's a caveat to this because in depression studies where they give someone a placebo and they say this is the best drug for depression, 4 out of 5 people that are in the placebo study get better or do as well as people who are taking the actual antidepressant. That's 80%, right? But here's the deal. They've been taking that sugar pill for about 8 weeks. Every day, taking that pill and combining that clear intention with an elevated emotion, they're moving into a new state of being. So now what that means is you got to do the work. That means you actually have to practice sitting down, getting beyond all the people in your life, all the things you need to do, the place you need to. You gotta get beyond your body wanting to get up and go because it's been programmed that way, and you got to tell your body you're not getting up until I say. Now, this is when you come out of the bleachers and you get on the playing field, because now you have to go from the known self, disentangle from those programs, and exist in the unknown and possibilities. So then the person who's combining the clear intention with an elevated emotion and not relying on some external or exogenous substance, they're doing it by thought alone, changing their state of being, I guarantee you it's going to begin to become a habit. And they're going to know when they're there and when they're not. And the word meditation means to become familiar with. So then the more you become familiar with how you feel in changing that state of being, the easier it will be for you to do it with your eyes open as well as your eyes closed. And if you go back to the old state of being, there's a good probability that your pain or your condition will come back. So there's this kind of waltz that goes on when people are learning how to heal and change. They take a few steps forward and then a few steps back, and then 3 steps forward and only 1 step back. And they got to practice self-regulating. They got to practice what they're paying attention to, what they're unconscious of. And if you stay with it for a long enough period of time, all of a sudden now the person reaches a point, we've measured what happens, where their chemistry changes so dramatically that they're literally in love with life. Now, imagine what happens when oxytocin is released in the quantities that we see. Oxytocin signals nitric oxide. Nitric oxide signals a chemical called endothelial-derived relaxing factor. And that's a big word or set of words that just means a chemical that signals the arteries in your heart to literally expand. And when they expand, you're getting more blood flow in there. And just like when your sexual organs are aroused and there's blood flow in there, now with the same intensity, you're going to feel it right in your heart, and it's going to be way bigger. And now the person's heart is wide open. So here's the question. The person feels those emotions. Do you think they're going to want to judge somebody else in that moment? You think they're going to want to hold a grudge? They're not going to try to forgive. They're going to feel so amazing. They're not going to want to lose this feeling, and they're just going to say, I forgive you. I'm not going to give this feeling up because of you. Now that's the side effect of true transformation. The side effect is a greater level of consciousness. The side effect is a greater skill set in life. And I think that when you start getting good at this, then all the things you thought you wanted, you no longer want, because when you're creating more brain and heart coherence, you feel more whole. And the more whole you feel, the less you live in lack. So how could you want many things if you feel whole? It feels like you already have them. And that's actually when you start to see those wonderful miracles, those synchronicities, those serendipities, those coincidences happening in a person. Those are experiences coming to them. That's the field dropping breadcrumbs saying, keep going, keep going. And there's a synchronization between that person's energy and their future. And the side effect of that are signs. And that's when it gets to be exciting, because every sign does what? It creates an enthusiasm, an excitement. And you're kind of going, hey, there's another sign. I'm going to go do it again. So now you're not going, oh, I have to meditate today. Oh, geez, I got to create my life.
You're looking forward
You're
to
like, oh my God, I don't want the magic to stop happening. I'm going to get into it. And every synchronicity creates that elevated emotion, and you use that energy for the next creation. And people climb out of their lives, climb out of their pasts.
Yeah. You know, in the book, Becoming Supernatural, you talk about, and you do this in You Are the Placebo too, you talk about the mechanism by which, you know, our thoughts can affect our body. And I thought one of the interesting things that I never really thought about, you talk about the upregulation, downregulation of some of our gene expression, but we have this term that's been thrown around, junk DNA, where 98% of our cells are filled with this junk DNA. And then you just, again, like the spontaneous remission, science just discards that. But you say, what if this is just the raw quantum building blocks for whatever the fuck you want to build?
Yeah.
You know, what if that's what that is?
I mean, that's a great conversation for 2 bottles of wine in about 4 hours, which to me, I'd rather talk about that than talk trash about anybody else or any sports figure, because that conversation is what invites possibilities. So the body's a protein-producing machine. Every single cell in your body, except red blood cells, makes proteins. Muscle cells make muscle proteins, actin and myosin. Skin cells make skin proteins, collagen and elastin. Your stomach cells make stomach proteins called enzymes. Your immune system makes immune proteins called antibodies or immunoglobulins. Your eye cells make eye proteins called keratin. So your body's a protein-producing machine. And in order for those cells to make proteins, a gene has to be regulated. So then they used to say genes create disease. Lie. It's an absolute lie. There's a very small percentage, about 5 to 1% of the people on the planet are born with a true genetic condition like type 1 diabetes. The other 95 to 99% is created from lifestyle or behaviors. 2 identical twins sharing the same genome. One dies at 52, the other one dies at 88. Well, what happened there? It was the reaction to the environment that caused their genes to be switched on or upregulated to make a healthy protein, or downregulated to make a cheaper protein. And it turns out that when you're living in stress and living in survival, you're living in emergency mode, and that's not a time for growth and repair.
Yeah.
That's a time to mobilize all the body's energy, all its resources from some endangered situation, real or imagined, in their life. So if you're living in emergency mode for an extended period of time, and you keep signaling that gene, well, my goodness, it makes sense then that over time, the gene's going to begin to wear out, just like taking a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. Sooner or later, you're going to start making a cheaper protein. So the expression of proteins literally is the expression of life. So then, is it possible then to signal the gene ahead of the environment? The answer is absolutely yes. Because if a person's waiting for their wealth to feel abundance, if they're waiting for their health to feel wholeness and gratitude, if they're waiting for their new relationship to feel love, they're living by the old model of reality of cause and effect, waiting for something out there to change to make them feel better. And here, take away their lack or emptiness. But the moment the person embraces the emotion ahead of the event, if they understood what they were doing and why they were doing it, then if the environment signals the gene, and it does, and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, when you embrace the emotion ahead of the experience, you're signaling the gene ahead of the environment. And if genes make proteins, and proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body, you begin to become that very person. So it's not our wealth, it's not our health, it's not our new relationships, it's not the things we accumulate, it's who we become.
Yeah.
So we overcome the old self, which takes a great act of will and awareness, and we become somebody else. So then when you become it, nobody can take that away from you. In fact, you know that you know how to do it, or you know that you are it. And an abundant person doesn't say, I'm abundant, I'm abundant, I'm abundant, or a healthy person doesn't say, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, I'm healthy. They don't say that. They are it.
Yeah.
So then most people have just been fooled by their senses because their 5% of their conscious mind is holding the intent, but their body is habituated into a predictable future or emotionally conditioned into the past. And they're saying, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, or I'm happy, I'm happy. And the body's going, you're miserable, you're unhappy. That thought can't even make it past the brainstem to the body. So then teaching people how to self-regulate, they have no idea when they start changing their emotional states, the amount of biological and energetic changes that take place within them and all around them. So then develop that skill and get really good at this. Then for the most part, you wouldn't be so interested in so many material things. You would be interested in facing off with yourself every day and asking, what is it that stands in the way between me and my future? What is it that stands in the way between me and my connection to the quantum field? I think that's the real question.
That is the real question. And I think, I can look to my own life to see myself in that place of grappling with the resistance to doing that and looking at the resistance, not only personally, but in the macro. All right, you shed this yoke of genetic determinism where it's not my fault. My genes are driving me this way. Well, then if you're really hard on yourself and you blame yourself for everything that happens, if you have that natural tendency, if you shed this idea that things are happening to you and it's not your fault no matter what, well, then you have to take responsibility. And if you're going to blame yourself for everything that's happened, and you're going to be really hard and you're not able to forgive yourself, well, you're not going to want to shed this idea of genetic determinism.
It's your identity now.
Right.
It becomes your identity. So it's a very interesting conversation because this is an unlearning process. I mean, Watson and Crick, telling people that genes are a library of possibilities. So we express 1.5% of our DNA. The other 98.5% is called junk DNA. And that 1.5%, that's 23,688 genes we express. We have 140,000 proteins that make up the physical body. How could you have more proteins than genes? It should be 1-to-1. Because on one gene, you can have thousands of variations depending on the signal. So I hypothesize that other 98.5% has to be signaled by electromagnetism, that the receptor sites on the outside of the cells are hundreds of times more sensitive to energy or electromagnetism than they are to chemistry. Chemistry is a downward causation. So imagine the person elevating their energetic state. Well, they are going to literally select and instruct new genes, and those genes may be the ones that create more significant and faster changes in the body. I mean, how do you explain a person in one meditation that's blind that comes out as now seeing? Like, what happened there? With a stroke patient who was paralyzed for years is now moving a limb. I mean, it's not matter that emits a field. That's an illusion. It's the field that creates matter. So then the fundamental question is, if you change the field, will you change matter? It's none of your business to change the tumor. That's the outcropping, that's the outpicturing of changing the pattern in the field. So getting people really good at this, and the closer they can connect to that unified field, the more their consciousness is connected to that consciousness, the shorter amount of time it'll take.
Yeah, and again, going back to that resistance, I mean, we started this discussion with that little piece that could cause resistance and maybe has caused resistance. Maybe me believing that loving life is a choice, and that little bit of sadness that brought those tears to my eyes when we were doing our brief meditation before the podcast, that little bit of sadness of like, wow, I could have been doing this whole time. I'm 38 and I've loved life sporadically and I've had a very blessed life. But if I would have chosen it, I could have been more passionate and I could have loved it even more. I could have loved the people that I loved. I could have loved the places, loved my family, loved the people that I've lost. I could have done all this. And then I'm like, oh no, but that's the wrong way to think, because that's again living in the past. Why not live in the present now, saying, okay, I forgive myself for the past. I did the best I fucking could. And now how about here on?
Right.
And here on, let me choose this new way.
And when you're ready to wake up, you wake up. And well, I mean, I believe I'm an eternal being. I believe I'm eternal. And in fact, all religions that you study always talk about you're going to be around for eternity, whether it's heaven or hell, whether it's karma or whatever, nirvana. Consciousness is going to exist. So you're going to be stuck with yourself for a very long time, which then begs the question, well, if I'm waking up now and it's 2019 and I have this healthy body and this charisma and I'm successful, my goodness, I'm going to use the same passion, the life that I've created with those great habits, and I'm going to turn it inward, and I'm going to bloom like a flower in a new way. Because, hey, someone did it at 33 years old. You're 38. So what? There are people in this group that we're about ready to go that are in their 80s, and they could be home watching Wheel of Fortune, and they're all in. And you can't tell me you're too old to do this work. We have people in their 80s and a few in their 90s. I've seen their brain scans, and they know how to do it. And you know what? They're happy. You can't tell me you're too sick to do this work any longer. We have really, really sick people that have reversed very serious health conditions and even genetic disorders that there were no solutions for in medical science. And there were days that they doubted themselves. And there were days that they didn't feel like doing their meditations. And there were days they were in so much fear because the doctors told them they were stupid and they were going to die. And there were days they could have excused themselves and said, I have too much going on, I'm too busy. And they could have excused themselves and not done the work. But guess what? They did it anyway. They overcame the conditions in their environment. They overcame their beliefs. They overcame those programs, the conditioning. They overcame their body. They overcame their fear. Their love for life started to become greater than their fear of death. That's just because they made the effort to turn the battleship around. And you can't even tell me that you're too overweight or too underweight or too out of shape. I've seen it on all shapes and sizes. You can't even tell me that you never meditated before. In fact, many times people who have never meditated before have the most profound readings because they're not trying to do anything or expect to do anything or doing it their way. They're just following what you tell them to do. And in their innocence, they run right into something really big. So what? At 38 years old, practicing this, you could say then my new goal is to live for 150 years in a body that's 38 or 48. And we're measuring telomeres. We have people, many people, their biological age is way different than their chronological age. They don't care that they're 38. Their body tells them they're 28. And why? Because they're working with down-regulating genes for disease and up-regulating genes for health every day. Why? Because they understand that they can. And if you don't understand that you can and you're ignorant, then it doesn't work. So then people who actually say, I'm going to experiment, I'm going to become the scientist with my life. I'm going to measure the effects of me at cause. That's how I live. I say, all right, I'm going to change my energy. I can tell you, nobody changes. In all the years I've been doing this, nobody changes until they change their energy. And when you change your energy, you change your life. And why not every day instead of getting up and searching for your cell phone? 86% of the people that have a smartphone, the first thing they do when they wake up is they do their WhatsApp, their text, their Facebook. They take a picture of their feet. They post it on Facebook. Then they do their Instagram, take a picture of their cat, and then they link in and they check one email, the other email, they check the news. And now their attention is on everything known in their life. They reaffirm their identity. And then they go through all those routine behaviors. 95% of them, they're not even present and conscious of. There's just a group of them. Or they're remembering their problems in their past. That's how they start their day. And don't expect anything in your life to change if your environment is controlling your feelings and thoughts. And if your environment is controlling how you feel and think, and I say to you, Aubrey, why are you so upset today? Oh, well, this person is upsetting me. What you're really saying is that person is controlling your feelings and your thoughts. And that means you're a victim to your environment. Well, to turn that around and you start realizing your feelings and thoughts create your environment, and you start seeing the effects of you at cause, you're going to react less to the people in your life because you're going to understand that you'll be back to the victim consciousness. And when you start seeing that you're creating outcomes in your life, you're going to